The early morning fog rolled over the naval amphibious base Coronado like a ghostly tide, the Pacific stretching gray and endless beyond the cliffs. Lieutenant Avery Cole stepped out of her Humvee, the soles of her combat boots crunching on gravel as she approached the armory. The sun had barely begun to pierce the haze, but the place already hummed with activity. Men hauling crates of ammunition, polishing rifles, and laughing with a bravado that only came from knowing you survived worse than anyone could imagine. Avery kept her head high, her eyes scanning the courtyard with calm precision. Every glance she caught felt like it measured her, the first female candidate in the SEAL unit, and she could feel the weight of doubt pressing against her shoulders. The murmurs began before she even reached the doorway. "She won't last a week," someone muttered. "They just want to make a show out of it." She ignored it. She always did. She'd spent the last 2 years preparing for this. Endless drills. 15-mile runs in the desert, 200-meter swims in freezing water, and mental exercises designed to break the mind before the body. And she had endured them all. Each time she failed, she rose again, stronger, faster, sharper. Failure had become a teacher. Mockery, a motivator. Inside the armory, the smell of oil, gunpowder residue, and polished metal wrapped around her like an old, familiar blanket. Rows of M4 South, sidearms, and machine guns gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Her reflection caught in the steel racks, dark hair tied tightly, piercing gray eyes, jaw set like forged steel. She didn't look out of place. But in this room, her presence was an anomaly, a disruption to the unspoken hierarchy that had existed for decades. A few of the SEALs glanced up from their cleaning tables, smirks flickering across their rugged faces. These were men who had seen death up close, who had gone on missions where one wrong step meant never coming home. And yet, here they were, judging her, a young woman in a uniform that carried both promise and suspicion. Lieutenant Cole, called the Armory sergeant, a wiry man with years etched into his lined face. "Report in. Check your weapons and prepare for the Lev fire drill." Avery nodded, her movements deliberate, confident. She checked each weapon methodically, her fingers gliding over the mechanisms like a pianist over keys. Nothing hurried, nothing wasted. Precision was everything. In the field, hesitation could mean death. The whispers didn't stop. "She's never handled an M203 before," one muttered. "How's she going to clear a compound under fire?" Another laughed softly. "Bet she cries the first time someone yells at her in formation." Avery heard it all, catalogued it, but never reacted. Reacting was for the weak. Observation and adaptation were her weapons. She approached a bench, placing her rifle carefully in its cradle. Every movement was deliberate. Every second, a silent statement. She belonged here. She didn't need to announce it. Her skill would speak louder than words ever could. Yet even in her controlled demeanor, there was a fire burning inside. She remembered the stairs during Bud S., the grueling 6-month hell that nearly broke her. She had climbed ropes in rain, swum in freezing water until her muscles screamed, crawled through mud-filled trenches, and endured the infamous log PT, where men and women were forced to carry heavy timber for miles over uneven terrain. She had been mocked, underestimated, laughed at, but she had finished, while some of the strongest men had quit. Now, standing in the armory, that memory fueled her. She could almost hear the ocean waves crashing on the cliffs outside, a distant echo reminding her of every swim, every cold night, every early morning where she had pushed beyond pain. A nearby SEAL, muscular with arms like steel cables, tossed his weapon onto the bench. "Huh," he muttered, almost to himself. "Wonder if she's even qualified to touch that thing." The comment was casual, almost playful, but Avery heard the venom behind it. She didn't reply. She never did. Instead, She moved to the weapons rack, selecting her M4, inspecting it like a surgeon preparing for surgery. She checked the barrel, chamber, and magazine. Every click of her hands against the metal was precise, intentional. The men watching her began to realize that she wasn't intimidated. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't anything they expected. "Lieutenant Cole," the sergeant barked. "Get to your station. Drill starts in 5. Avery slung her weapon, double-checked her gear, and walked toward the training area. Each step was deliberate, measured. The men followed her with their eyes, some shaking their heads, others narrowing their eyes with suspicion or curiosity. She ignored all of it. Her mind was on the drill, on what she had to prove, not to them, but to herself. She remembered her father's words before she left for training. "They'll doubt you. They'll mock you. But that's their problem. You only need to answer to the mission." Her father had been a Navy officer himself, a man who had walked similar halls and understood the politics of military life. Avery carried his advice like armor. As she reached the training courtyard, she paused for a moment. The early sun had broken through the fog, catching the glint of weapons, the sheen of sweat on hardened faces, the determination etched into every man she was about to face. She could see the challenge in their eyes, the doubt that they had buried in mockery and jokes. But she also saw opportunity, the chance to prove that skill, courage, and discipline were not gendered traits. The whistle blew. A sound sharp, cutting, signaling the start of a drill. Avery tightened her gloves, adjusted her vest, and stepped forward. Each step echoed her confidence. Each breath drew her closer to what she had worked for her entire life. This was more than a drill. This was the first battle in a war for respect, for recognition, for equality in a brotherhood that had never seen a woman like her. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to argue. She only needed to act. Because in the armory, on the concrete, under the eyes of men who doubted her, Avery Cole would soon show them that real SEALs were defined not by gender, but by heart, skill, and the unbreakable will to survive and dominate. And that was only the beginning. The armory hummed with the low, metallic rhythm of weapons being cleaned. Magazines clicked in and out of rifles, and the occasional sharp bark of a sergeant cutting through the chatter. Lieutenant Avery Cole stepped through the doorway, every muscle alert, eyes scanning the room. She had completed the initial drills, but the murmurs followed her like shadows. Every glance she caught felt like judgment, some skeptical, some amused, some quietly resentful. A cluster of SEALs lounged near the benches. Chief Donovan, Harris, and Reed, seasoned operators with battle scars and reputations that demanded respect. They were tall, broad-shouldered, and exuded confidence built on years of success and survival. Their eyes lit up with a different kind of energy the moment Avery entered. Amusement, tinged with disbelief. "Careful, Cole," Donovan drawled, leaning casually against a rifle rack. "Those rifles are heavier than your purse." A few chuckles rippled through the group. Harris added, "Yeah, hope she doesn't drop it on her foot. That would be tragic." Reed smirked. "Maybe we should get her some instructions first. You know, a manual on how to operate a weapon." The laughter wasn't malicious, at least not entirely, but it carried the weight of skepticism. Avery felt the sting, but she didn't flinch. She had endured far worse. Men yelling at her during cold water swims, dragging her through mud-filled trenches, and telling her she would never pass Bud S. This was just another test, another wall to climb. She calmly moved to her weapon, setting her M4 on the bench, inspecting it meticulously. Every movement was precise. A click here, a check there, fingers brushing against metal, as if she were listening to it speak. She loaded the magazine with mechanical efficiency, chambered a round, and double-checked her sidearm. "You gonna cry if it jams?" Reed asked, louder this time, thinking it would get a laugh. The room stilled for a moment, sensing the tension rise. Avery's gaze lifted slowly, gray eyes locking with his. She said nothing at first. Silence, heavy and deliberate, hung in the air. Then, with calm precision, she said, "You want to see what I can do?" Her voice was quiet, almost soft, but it carried a weight that made even Donovan pause. Donovan's smirk widened, mistaking her calm for nervousness. "Prove it, Lieutenant. Let's see if the hype matches the reality." The sergeant called out instructions for a live close-quarters combat CQC drill, laying out a course of tight corridors, barricades, and moving targets. The men were eager, confident in their skills, fully expecting her to stumble. Donovan went first. He moved through the course with practiced ease. Every corner cleared, every target neutralized. He rolled to avoid fire, swept the room efficiently, and emerged from the last doorway in 42 seconds flat. The room erupted with muted applause and nods of approval. This was textbook, professional, impressive by any standard. Then it was Avery's turn. She took her position at the start line. The men watched her, some leaning forward, some crossing their arms in skeptical judgment. Donovan's smirk was tight now, a mixture of amusement and growing uncertainty. Avery adjusted her gloves, took a breath, and stepped forward. The whistle blew. She moved like liquid steel. Every motion precise, every corner cleared with perfect angles, every shot exact. Her reloads were seamless, almost surgical, fluid enough to look effortless. She transitioned from rifle to sidearm without hesitation, all while moving backward and sliding under barricades. She neutralized targets without a second wasted. Time, 36 seconds. Silence engulfed the room. The clock beeped, signaling the end of her run, but no one moved. Donovan's jaw tightened, eyes wide with disbelief. Harris and Reed stared at the floor, mouths agape. They had been mocking her moments ago, confident that she was out of her league, and she had just outperformed them all. Avery set her weapons down with deliberate calm. She looked around the room, catching each face in turn. "Done," she said softly, almost to herself. But her words carried a sting, a quiet declaration. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. The silence was broken by a nervous chuckle from a junior SEAL, but the veterans remained speechless. Donovan finally spoke, his voice low, grudging respect seeping through. "Not bad, Cole. Not bad at all." Avery didn't smile. She didn't need to. The moment wasn't about approval. It was about proving that she belonged. Every step, every drill, every action she had taken since stepping into this unit had led to this moment. The first undeniable proof that she was more than just a political experiment. More than just the first woman in the unit. She was a SEAL. Word of her performance spread quickly through the base. By evening, whispers of the lieutenant who smoked Donovan filled every hallway, every barracks, every training area. Some men avoided her, uncomfortable with the truth that she had just shattered their assumptions. Others approached with tentative curiosity, questions about her training, her techniques, and how she had moved so flawlessly. Avery spent the evening cleaning her weapons again, methodically and silently, letting the events settle. She didn't celebrate. Respect wasn't granted in a single drill, and mockery had not yet been fully erased. She knew this was only the beginning. The real battles, both in the field and within the team, were still ahead. Later that night, she stood on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed relentlessly, cold spray stinging her face. She thought of her training, the cold water swims, the log carries, the runs through mud and rain, the drown-proofing exercises. She had survived every challenge because she had the one thing that mattered more than skill or strength, the refusal to quit. The wind carried the faint echoes of laughter and doubt from the armory, but now those echoes were different. They were a challenge, a reminder that every victory had to be reinforced, every moment of doubt met with unwavering resolve. Avery smiled faintly. The armory had witnessed her first triumph. Soon, the world would see the seal she had become. This was more than a demonstration of skill. It was a declaration. The first step toward dismantling every stereotype, every whisper of doubt. In a unit built on trust, teamwork, and lethal precision, Avery Cole had already proven one truth. In the end, action spoke louder than words, and she had just made hers echo across the entire base. The morning sun had barely broken through the fog over Coronado, casting long, cold shadows across the concrete courtyard where the SEALs gathered for another drill. Avery Cole walked toward the armory, her boots silent against the hard surface. The air carried a mixture of salt from the nearby Pacific, the metallic tang of weapon oil, and the low hum of tension, the kind that only precedes a test worth remembering. Inside, the room was alive with anticipation. Chief Donovan, Harris, and Reed were already there, assembling their rifles, adjusting their gear with practiced ease. Each of them had heard the rumors from yesterday. The first female SEAL candidate had outperformed Donovan himself, shaving 6 seconds off his time on the CQC course. That kind of feat could not be ignored. Donovan's pride was bruised, his confidence shaken. For years, he had been one of the fastest and most precise in the unit. Now, a woman, someone he had underestimated and mocked, had outpaced him. The thought gnawed at him like salt on an open wound. This time, he muttered to Harris, "I'll make sure she's just lucky." Avery didn't hear him. She never did. Her focus was absolute, her mind scanning every corner of the armory, every detail of the course that had been laid out. Every target, every barricade, every sharp corner was a calculation. She had trained for this her entire life. Every night she had spent running, swimming, crawling through mud, or pulling weights in silence had led her to this moment. The sergeant blew the whistle, and the room erupted into controlled chaos. Donovan went first. He moved swiftly, efficiently, clearing each barricade, neutralizing targets with practiced precision. His motions were loud and confident. A roll here, a sweep there, the rifle biting into the shoulder at every transition. The clock stopped at 42 seconds, and he stepped back, chest rising and falling, eyes bright with the satisfaction of superiority regained. Then Avery stepped forward. She tied her hair tighter, adjusted her vest, and assumed her stance at the starting line. The room watched, silent. Donovan smirked, a faint curve of amusement still lingering. "Ready to lose again?" he said. She didn't respond. She never did to taunts. Instead, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself. A single breath, sharp and measured, and she opened them again. The whistle blew. Avery moved like a shadow across the armory floor. Every motion was fluid, efficient, and lethal. She didn't run. She flowed. Corners were cleared with micro-adjustments of her body, targets neutralized with deliberate, practiced precision. Her rifle felt like an extension of herself, a natural part of her being, not a tool to be wielded. Harris and Reed blinked in disbelief as she transitioned seamlessly from rifle to sidearm mid-course. She rolled beneath a barricade, landed in a crouch, and continued without missing a beat. The reloads were silent, almost imperceptible. Each click of the magazine precise, every chambering of a round flawless. She moved faster than any of them expected, yet her composure remained uncheckable. The seconds ticked by, merciless. Donovan's smirk faltered as he watched her maneuver with uncanny efficiency. He knew experience, strength, and speed, but Avery was operating on an entirely different wavelength. Her awareness, anticipation, and control or something he had never seen in any operator, male or female. 36 seconds. The timer beeped. Silence. No one moved. The SEALs stared, eyes wide, hearts racing with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Avery set her weapons down methodically, breathing steady, posture calm. She looked around the room, letting her gaze sweep over each man who had mocked her just the day before. "Done," she said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of undeniable authority. Donovan stepped forward, jaw tight, pride wounded but grudging respect emerging. "Not bad, Cole," he muttered. "Not bad at all." Avery nodded slightly. No smile, no celebration. This was not about recognition. It was about proving that skill, focus, and resilience mattered more than stereotypes, more than mockery, more than assumptions. She had earned her place in the Armory that day, and everyone who witnessed it understood it, even if they struggled to admit it. Word of her performance traveled quickly across the base. By evening, whispers of the lieutenant who outpaced Donovan circulated through every unit. Some men approached her, hesitant, eyes wide, curious to see the woman who had silenced the Armory. Others avoided her, unwilling to confront their own assumptions. Avery spent the rest of the day cleaning her weapons in silence, methodically, almost ceremonially. She didn't need the praise, the rumors, or the recognition. Her satisfaction was private, rooted in the knowledge that she had proven herself in the arena where it mattered most. Action. Later, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs and the ocean, waves crashed relentlessly against the shore. Avery stood outside, breathing in the salty air. She remembered the countless nights she had spent running in darkness, swimming in freezing water, enduring pain she never thought she would survive. Each moment of struggle had prepared her for today. The Armory had been her battlefield, and she had won, not with arrogance, not with luck, but with discipline, skill, and unyielding resolve. The SEALs who had doubted her would remember this moment, whether they admitted it or not. And Avery knew it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Tomorrow, she would face new challenges, ones far beyond the controlled environment of drills and armories. She would face real missions, real threats, and real dangers. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. The first battle had been won, and the lesson was clear. Underestimate her at your own peril. As night fell over Coronado, the legend of Avery Cole, the woman who moved through the Armory like a ghost, faster and sharper than anyone expected, began to take root. In the hearts and minds of those who had mocked her, a seed of respect had been planted. And in Avery herself, a quiet confidence blossomed, stronger than ever, ready to carry her into the storms that were surely coming. She turned back toward the Armory once more, eyes sharp, posture straight, a single thought guiding her. Strength isn't given, it's earned. And she had just earned hers, in silence, in precision, and in action. The hum of the Armory was gone now, replaced by a tense silence that lingered across the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Word of Lieutenant Avery Cole's performance during the CQC drill had spread quickly. The men who had mocked her just days before now walked with a different awareness, some with quiet grudging respect, others with a thin veneer of resentment. The Armory had become a symbolic battlefield, and Avery had emerged victorious. She had finished her weapons cleaning and walked out into the courtyard alone, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the concrete. The air was crisp, the faint scent of salt from the Pacific still clinging to her uniform. She could feel eyes on her as she moved, silent gazes that carried a mixture of awe, suspicion, and quiet challenge. She ignored them, as she always did. The men in the unit were not accustomed to being humbled, and few of them had ever experienced anyone, outperforming Donovan, the man who had commanded respect through skill and experience. Some whispered that her timing had been fluked, that she had been lucky, or that the drill had been adjusted to favor her. The rumors spread like wildfire, some out of disbelief, others out of envy. Donovan didn't speak much that evening, but when he did, his voice carried the weight of grudging acknowledgement. "She's fast. Too fast," he muttered to Harris as they walked back to the barracks. Harris simply nodded, watching Avery in the distance as she carried her gear with calm precision. "I can't tell if I'm impressed or furious," he admitted under his breath. Avery's evening was quiet, spent in the solitude she had learned to treasure. She cleaned and inspected her weapons with methodical precision, every motion deliberate, every click measured. Her focus was inward, on the rhythm of her training, on the memory of the drill, and on the knowledge that the Armory had been only the first trial. Respect had been earned, yes, but trust, the true currency in this brotherhood, had yet to be fully secured. Later, in the barracks, she removed her boots and sat on the edge of her bunk. The walls were lined with photographs, plaques, and awards that chronicled the history of the SEALs who had come before her. She ran her hands over a small plaque dedicated to a fallen operator from a past mission, feeling a quiet connection to the lineage she now joined. The weight of history pressed against her, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what she was striving to uphold. Evenings on the base were often quiet, the air filled with the low hum of distant waves and the occasional shout from a late-night training exercise. Avery sat with her thoughts, reflecting on what had just transpired. The Armory had been a test, but it was also a mirror, reflecting the prejudices, doubts, and insecurities of those around her. And it had revealed something else, her own resilience, her ability to act under pressure, and her unshakable focus. Not all reactions were positive. Some men avoided her, unsure how to interact with a woman who had proven herself so thoroughly. Harris, usually brash and confident, now glanced her way with an uneasy mix of respect and insecurity. Reed muttered under his breath when she passed, something about getting lucky or showing up once. But Donovan, quiet and brooding, seemed different. He no longer dismissed her. Instead, he studied her with a careful eye, weighing every move, every glance. He knew she was no fluke, and that knowledge unsettled him. Avery had long since learned that SEALs valued action over words, results over explanations. She didn't need to prove herself through debate or argument. She needed to demonstrate skill, judgment, and courage, and she had. Yet the Armory incident was only the first layer of the larger challenge she faced, earning the trust of a team that had never had to accept a woman in their ranks. The whispers and doubts would not disappear overnight. Respect had been earned in one moment, but acceptance was a war of its own. That night, she went to the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, the same place she often retreated to after long days of training. The waves pounded relentlessly against the rocks, white foam spraying into the cold night air. She closed her eyes, listening to the roar of the ocean, feeling the wind whip against her face. It reminded her of every early morning swim, every grueling run, every night she had spent training alone. Those moments had forged her, and now they had prepared her for this. Avery's mind returned to the Armory, the mockery, the challenge, the victory. She didn't dwell on the laughter or the doubt. Instead, she focused on the skill that had allowed her to succeed. Every movement, every decision, every reaction had been practiced thousands of times. It wasn't luck. It was discipline, precision, and control. And tomorrow, the world beyond the Armory would demand more than skill. It would demand leadership, courage, and the ability to make split-second decisions under life or death pressure. In her quiet solitude, she also reflected on the team dynamics. She knew some would never fully accept her. Others would need time to adjust. And Donovan, the man she had silently challenged and outperformed, would be a key player in her journey. He had the authority, the experience, and the respect of the unit. His recognition of her skill, however grudging, was a vital first step toward integration. The armory was quiet now, the echoes of yesterday's drill lingering only in memory. But Avery knew the story wasn't over. The reactions of her peers, the whispers of doubt, and the subtle shifts in behavior were all part of the battlefield she navigated daily. The armory had been a symbolic victory. The real test would come in missions where lives, not just pride, were at stake. Before turning in for the night, Avery meticulously arranged her gear, each weapon polished, each strap adjusted. She checked every magazine, every round, and every piece of equipment with the same precision that had carried her through countless hours of grueling training. Tomorrow, she would rise again before dawn, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. The whispers, the mockery, and the tension of the unit were not obstacles, but motivators. Each doubt cast upon her only strengthened her resolve. As she lay down in the barracks, exhaustion finally pressing against her body, Avery allowed herself a quiet thought. Respect could be fleeting. Trust was earned slowly, but skill, determination, and courage were constant. And she had all three in abundance. The night settled over Coronado, dark and still, the ocean waves a distant but steady drumbeat. Somewhere within the base, whispers of Lieutenant Cole continued to spread. Some doubted, some admired, some feared, but all would remember that day in the armory, the day a woman had moved through their ranks with unmatched precision and emerged unchallenged. And Avery Cole, lying quietly in the darkness, knew that this was only the beginning. The battles ahead would test her in ways the armory never could. The real proof of her worth as a SEAL was still to come, beyond the drills, beyond the mockery, in the chaos of missions where hesitation could mean death. But for now, she rested, readying herself for the storm that lay ahead. The night was unusually dark over the Somali coast, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole. Lieutenant Avery Cole crouched in the Zodiac, a small inflatable boat cutting silently through the black waves. The team was tense but focused, checking their gear, weapons, and communications one last time. Donovan was there, second in command, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, muscles coiled like springs. They were a unit trained for precision, but tonight, the unpredictability of real-world operations loomed larger than any drill. Operation Nightfall had been briefed weeks ago. Intercept a high-value smuggling network that had been supplying weapons across the region. Intelligence indicated a heavily fortified compound inland, with armed guards, cameras, and rapid response teams. Avery's role was critical: reconnaissance, breach coordination, and leadership of a forward squad tasked with clearing entry points under potential fire. The waves slapped against the boat, cold and relentless. Avery adjusted her vest, making sure the M4 was slung across her chest, the sidearm holstered but ready. Her team glanced at her, the same SEALs who had once doubted her skills. Tonight, doubt had no place. Only action mattered. A rogue wave slammed into the boat mid-approach, tossing men and equipment into the icy water. Chaos erupted instantly. Donovan shouted orders, but Avery reacted first. Without hesitation, she dove into the water, pulling a disoriented teammate back to the boat. Her hands were numb, the current trying to drag her under, but she refused to falter. Inch by inch, she fought the pull of the ocean until the team was back on the boat, weapons intact and squad intact. They reached shore silently, the darkness hiding their movements, but the threat always present. The team dispersed into the jungle terrain surrounding the target compound. Avery led the forward element, her eyes sweeping every shadow, every rustle of leaves. Every step carried the weight of the lives behind her, men who trusted her to make the right call. The first obstacle appeared almost immediately, a heavily fortified checkpoint, guards patrolling the perimeter. Avery signaled silently, coordinating the team with hand gestures, positioning them strategically. Her instructions were precise, measured, and executed flawlessly. Within minutes, they neutralized the checkpoint without raising an alarm, moving deeper into the compound's territory. Donovan followed closely, still uneasy, watching her coordinate the team with the authority of someone who had earned their respect. He had underestimated her once. He wouldn't make that mistake again. He saw the confidence, the clarity of mind, the calm under pressure. Avery wasn't just leading by rank. She was leading by example, a true SEAL in action. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the far side of the compound. One of the team's men was pinned down. Without hesitation, Avery sprinted toward the threat, rifle raised, eyes scanning for exit routes and cover. Her movements were fluid, precise, every shot controlled, every decision calculated. She reached the pinned teammate, pulling him to safety behind a low wall. The team regrouped, but the mission had only just begun. Avery's reconnaissance revealed multiple entry points, potential ambushes, and improvised defenses. She calculated every risk, communicated it clearly, and positioned the squad for the breach. The forward team waited for the signal, hearts pounding, breathing synchronized, muscles coiled for action. When the moment came, Avery led the breach. The door exploded inward, and the room erupted into chaos. Guards turned, but Avery and her team moved with lethal efficiency. Every shot counted. Every corner was cleared methodically, every obstacle anticipated. She transitioned seamlessly from rifle to sidearm, neutralizing threats without hesitation. Midway through the compound, a sudden explosion trapped 2 men beneath debris. The smoke and flames threatened to overwhelm them. Avery didn't hesitate. She dove into the inferno, pulling the trapped operators free, their lives hanging on her strength and courage. Her uniform caught fire briefly, but she ignored it, focused entirely on survival and mission success. Outside, the final challenge awaited: extraction. Enemy reinforcements were approaching, forcing the team to retreat to the pickup point on the beach. Avery grabbed her M249, providing covering fire as the team ran. Each shot was precise, measured, and deadly. She suppressed advancing threats, buying her squad precious seconds. By the time the last man reached the extraction helicopter, Avery's ammo was nearly depleted, her body exhausted, uniform torn and burned in several places. Donovan finally reached her, hauling her aboard with an expression of disbelief and admiration. No words were needed. The look in his eyes said it all. She had proven herself under the ultimate test in life-or-death combat against an enemy that didn't care about gender, only survival. The helicopter lifted off, the roar of the rotors drowning out the chaos below. Avery sat back, surveying her squad. Every man was accounted for, alive and moving toward safety. The mission had been a success. Intelligence targets secured. The compound neutralized. But more than that, Avery had solidified her place within the team. She had earned trust, not with words, but with action. Back at base, the medics treated minor injuries, scrapes, burns, fatigue, but no one questioned the heroism displayed during Operation Nightfall. Donovan, usually stoic, nodded once to Avery before walking away. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of respect, acknowledgement, and acceptance. Avery didn't seek praise or headlines. She cleaned her weapons in silence, the familiar ritual grounding her after the chaos. Every movement was precise, deliberate, a reflection of her discipline. She knew that the mission was just one of many to come, that challenges and dangers would continue to test her in ways the Armory never could. Yet, in the quiet aftermath, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The waves crashed against the shore outside, a steady drumbeat that echoed the rhythm of her own heart. She thought of the men she had saved, the team she had led, and the fire in her own spirit that had carried her through the storm. The Armory had tested skill. Operation Nightfall had tested courage, leadership, and resolve. Tonight, Avery Cole had not only survived, she had led, protected, and triumphed. The team that once mocked her now understood she was not an experiment. She was not a novelty. She was a SEAL, through and through. And as the helicopter carried them back to base, Avery's thoughts drifted to the missions yet to come. If she had faced the ocean, the storm, and enemy fire with this focus and precision, what else could she accomplish? The world would soon find out, but for now, she allowed herself a brief, quiet satisfaction. She had crossed the threshold. She had proven herself in combat. Tomorrow, there would be more drills, more missions, more challenges. But tonight, Avery Cole could finally breathe. She had earned her place, not through talk, not through ceremony, but through action. And in the dangerous, unpredictable world of the SEALs, action was the only language that truly mattered. The night air over Somalia was thick with tension, filled with the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder. Lieutenant Avery Cole crouched behind a jagged wall of concrete, ears straining to catch every sound, the snap of a twig, the distant rumble of enemy movement, the chaotic crackle of gunfire. Operation Nightfall had escalated far beyond anything the team had trained for. Earlier, the mission had gone according to plan. The checkpoints cleared, the compound infiltrated, high-value targets neutralized. But in the chaos, an unexpected explosion had collapsed part of the structure, trapping 2 team members beneath debris. "Lieutenant!" Donovan's voice cut through the night, urgent but controlled. "They're pinned. We need a volunteer." Avery didn't hesitate. Time wasn't a luxury, and hesitation could mean death. She sprinted across the debris-littered corridor, dodging live fire, weaving between flames that licked at the walls and ceiling. Heat scorched her uniform, singeing the edges of her gloves, but she pressed on. The first man, Corporal Jenkins, was trapped under a beam heavier than most could lift. Avery dropped beside him, assessing quickly. She could see the jagged metal, the splintered concrete, the smoke filling the room like a choking fog. She gritted her teeth and dug under the rubble, leveraging every ounce of strength she had. The second man, Petty Officer Ramirez, was pinned nearby, his leg trapped beneath a twisted beam. Avery moved with astonishing speed and control, coordinating her actions while still under fire. She barked calm instructions. "Hold still. I've got you. 1, 2, 3, lift." The beam shifted, groaning under the weight, and Ramirez was free. Outside, the firefight intensified. Enemy combatants had discovered the intrusion, and reinforcements were closing in. Avery grabbed her M249, a machine gun designed for suppression, and laid down precise, controlled bursts of fire. Each shot covered her team, keeping enemies at bay, buying them precious seconds to regroup. Donovan emerged beside her, expression taut. He had always relied on Avery's precision, but seeing her operate under extreme pressure, her hands blistered, uniform torn, every muscle screaming, left him in awe. "Cole," he shouted over the roar of gunfire, "we've got to get out of here." Avery's eyes scanned the room. Exit points were limited, the enemy closing fast. She weighed every option, every risk. The team's lives rested on split-second decisions. Without hesitation, she signaled a path through the debris, coordinating a retreat while maintaining suppressive fire. Every movement was deliberate, rehearsed through instinct honed in months of grueling training. The last moments in the building were chaotic. Sparks flew from a ruptured electrical line. Smoke and dust blinded the operators, and enemy fire rattled off the walls. Avery's heart pounded, but her mind remained razor-sharp. She lifted the final debris beam off Jenkins, dragging him to cover while firing short, controlled bursts at advancing targets. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, Avery led the team through a narrow corridor, out into the night air. Gunfire still echoed behind them, but the extraction point was in sight. Donovan covered the rear, eyes constantly scanning, trusting Avery to navigate the front. She ducked under low-hanging wires, vaulted small obstacles, and moved as if she had been born for this chaos. Finally, they reached the extraction site. The helicopter's rotors were a deafening roar, the wind buffeting them as the team scrambled aboard. Avery's hands were blistered, her uniform ripped in multiple places, and her breathing was ragged. She hauled herself into the chopper last, making sure every teammate was secure before settling into the seat. Donovan leaned back, exhaling, trying to steady his voice. "Lieutenant, that was incredible." The words were simple, but their weight carried respect, relief, and something deeper. Acknowledgement of Avery's courage and leadership under extreme pressure. The helicopter lifted off, and as they rose into the night sky, Avery finally allowed herself to scan her team. Every member accounted for, every life saved. The mission had been a success, but more importantly, trust had been solidified. Respect had been earned not through drills, but in the crucible of combat. Back at base, medics attended to minor burns, scrapes, and bruises. Avery's injuries were superficial, but the fatigue in her muscles and the ache in her joints were real. She allowed them to patch her up quietly, her focus already shifting to debriefs, mission reports, and preparation for the next operation. Donovan approached her afterward, the usual stoic expression softened with genuine admiration. "Cole," he said, voice low, almost reverent, "I underestimated you. Today, you saved lives. More than anyone else in that room." Avery shook her head slightly, brushing ash from her uniform. "I didn't do it for praise," she said. "I did it to make sure we all came home." Her eyes were calm, unwavering, yet Donovan could see the fire beneath the surface, the relentless drive that had carried her through every drill, every challenge, every mission. News of Operation Nightfall spread across the base. Reporters didn't need to embellish the story. The men who had once mocked her were witnesses. They had seen her courage, precision, and leadership firsthand. She became known not just as a competent operator, but as a hero in the eyes of those who mattered most, her team. That night, Avery returned to her quarters and cleaned her weapons with a ritualistic precision that had become second nature. Each click, each brush of the barrel was a reminder of the day's trials and triumphs. She allowed herself a brief reflection. In the controlled chaos of the armory, she had proven skill. In the unpredictable chaos of combat, she had proven courage, leadership, and resolve. Avery sat by the window, staring out at the ocean beyond the cliffs. The waves crashed endlessly, relentless, unyielding, yet there was a rhythm, a pattern, a constant she could count on. It mirrored her own discipline and the journey she had undertaken. Through ridicule, training, and now combat, she had remained unbroken. The team that once whispered doubts now approached her with caution and respect. Donovan, Harris, and Reed no longer treated her as an anomaly. They saw her for what she truly was, a SEAL, forged through challenge, strengthened by experience, and proven under fire. But Avery knew better than anyone that this was not the end. War was unpredictable, missions were perilous, and danger was constant. Operation Nightfall had been a test, a grueling life-or-death trial that she had survived and mastered. The lessons learned tonight would carry her through countless missions to come, shaping her legacy within the SEALs and beyond. As she prepared for sleep, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, Avery allowed herself one thought. Every doubt cast upon her, every mocking word from the armory, every whispered question of her capability. All of it had forged a path to this moment. And she would continue to prove herself not through words, but through action. The ocean roared against the shore, waves pounding like the heartbeat of the world itself. Avery closed her eyes, letting the sound anchor her. She had faced fire, water, and steel, and she had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger. The SEALs she led, the lives she had saved, and the missions yet to come were all part of a journey she had embraced from the very beginning. Tonight, Lieutenant Avery Cole had earned something far greater than respect. She had earned trust, proof, and the unshakable knowledge that she belonged in the Armory, on the battlefield, and in the legacy of the SEALs. The sun rose slowly over the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, casting long golden streaks across the concrete courtyard. Lieutenant Avery Cole stood outside the Armory, rifle slung across her shoulder, observing her team moving with the quiet efficiency of soldiers who had survived the storm of Operation Nightfall. Today felt different. The tension, whispers, and skepticism that had marked the days since her arrival had begun to dissipate, replaced by a grudging, undeniable respect. Inside the briefing room, the SEALs gathered for the after-action debrief. Maps were laid out on the table, photographs of the compound and intelligence reports covering every inch. Donovan stood at the head of the table, a rare glint of admiration in his eyes. He cleared his throat, voice carrying the authority of a leader who knew the weight of responsibility. Operation Nightfall was a success, he began. Targets neutralized, high-value intel recovered, and most importantly, every member of this team returned alive. That wouldn't have happened without Lieutenant Cole's decisive actions under fire. A murmur of acknowledgement ran through the room. Some SEALs exchanged glances, disbelief mixing with respect. Avery remained silent, listening, arms crossed, posture relaxed but alert. Recognition wasn't new to her, but validation from her peers, men who had once doubted her abilities, was a milestone worth noting. Donovan continued, his voice steady and deliberate. Cole coordinated the forward element, executed critical rescues under extreme conditions, and provided covering fire that ensured extraction. Her actions were not just competent, they were exemplary. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Harris, who had initially been one of her harshest skeptics, spoke. "She saved lives out there," he said simply, tone grudging but sincere. "We all know it. I misjudged her." Reed nodded, still somewhat stiff, but clearly acknowledging the truth. "She didn't just follow orders. She led, made decisions I wouldn't have trusted anyone else to make." The weight of their words was not lost on Avery. She nodded slightly, acknowledging their respect, but offering no flourish or boast. Her focus was not on personal glory. It had never been. Her satisfaction came from the knowledge that the mission was accomplished. Her team was safe, and she had proven that skill, courage, and leadership transcended doubt and prejudice. After the debrief, the team moved to the Armory to inspect and maintain their weapons. Avery worked silently, methodically, every motion precise, her presence commanding without demanding attention. She could feel eyes on her, some curious, some respectful, some hesitant, but she paid them no mind. The respect she had earned was evident not in whispered comments, but in the unspoken acknowledgement in the way her peers followed her lead during equipment checks and tactical discussions. Later that day, the base command convened a small ceremony. The commanding officer, a decorated officer who had seen countless operations and trained hundreds of SEALs, addressed the gathered personnel. "Lieutenant Avery Cole," he began, voice carrying authority and sincerity. "Your performance during Operation Nightfall was nothing short of exceptional. You demonstrated courage, leadership, and skill under conditions that would challenge even the most seasoned operators. Your actions have saved lives, protected your team, and set a new standard for what it means to serve as a SEAL. Avery stood at attention, silent, absorbing the weight of the commendation. She had anticipated recognition, but not the ceremony, not the formal acknowledgement of her peers and superiors. Yet she did not let pride cloud her composure. Each medal, each acknowledgement, was a reflection of teamwork, preparation, and unyielding focus, not a measure of her worth alone. Donovan stepped beside her afterward, his usual stoicism softened. "Cole," he said quietly, voice low so only she could hear, "I've trained with some of the best operators in the world. I've never seen someone move and think like you did out there. You earned this." We all saw it. Avery met his gaze. "Thank you, sir," she replied simply. No words could fully capture the satisfaction of earning not only professional recognition, but the trust of those who had doubted her from day one. The evening brought a quiet reflection. Avery returned to the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, the waves crashing relentlessly against the rocks below. The sun had dipped toward the horizon, casting the sky in deep orange and violet hues. She allowed herself a moment of quiet contemplation, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the armory, the mockery, the whispers of doubt, the relentless drills, and the grueling BODS training. Each challenge, each moment of doubt, had prepared her for the reality of combat and leadership. Operation Nightfall had been the ultimate test, and she had not only survived, but excelled, earning the respect and trust of her team. Yet Avery knew this was not the end. The life of a SEAL was defined by constant challenge, relentless improvement, and unwavering vigilance. The respect she had earned today would be tested tomorrow. Missions would become more complex, dangers more unpredictable, and leadership would demand more than skill and courage. But for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The team that once whispered doubts now sought her counsel. Donovan and the others no longer questioned her presence. They deferred to her judgment in critical situations. Avery had crossed a threshold, from an outsider, a subject of skepticism, to a fully accepted and respected member of the SEAL team. As night fell over Coronado, Avery returned to her quarters. She cleaned her weapons one last time before rest, each click of the bolt, each brush of oil, a meditation on the journey she had undertaken. The calm after the storm was temporary, a brief pause before the next challenge. But in that quiet moment, she knew she had earned her place. The SEAL community was known for toughness, resilience, and a strict code of honor. Avery Cole had not only met those standards, she had set a new example. Her presence in the unit was no longer a subject of debate. It was a reality, acknowledged by every operator who had witnessed her in action. The whispers had faded, replaced by nods of acknowledgement, subtle glances of respect, and the quiet understanding that Avery Cole was no longer a newcomer. She was a SEAL in every sense, proven in training, tested in combat, and accepted by those who mattered most. And as she prepared for sleep, listening to the steady rhythm of the ocean waves, Avery knew that the journey was far from over. There would be new missions, new challenges, and new tests of courage and skill. But for the first time, she felt the full weight of acceptance, trust, and respect from her peers. She had earned it through precision, determination, and unwavering resolve. Tonight, she could rest knowing she had proven herself not through words or promises, but through action, courage, and leadership under fire. The armory mockery, the whispered doubts, the long nights of grueling preparation, all had led to this moment. Avery Cole had crossed the threshold. She was no longer just a candidate, no longer just a woman in a male-dominated unit. She was a SEAL fully recognized, fully respected, and fully ready for whatever lay ahead. The morning sun rose over Coronado once more, spilling light across the base with quiet inevitability. Lieutenant Avery Cole stood at the edge of the training grounds, surveying the scene with the calm, analytical gaze of someone who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. The barracks were alive with preparation. New SEAL candidates running drills, EXPERIENCED, operators checking gear, and instructors calling out commands with precision. Avery's journey had begun in the shadow of doubt, mocked in the armory, tested in grueling training, and finally validated in combat. Operation Nightfall had been the crucible where skill met courage, but her legacy was being forged not in a single act, but in the ripple effects her presence had caused across the SEAL community. She watched as a group of younger operators practiced marksmanship, moving with a mixture of nervous energy and fierce determination. Among them were faces unfamiliar to her, candidates she would eventually mentor. Avery's mind traced the path she had traveled, the ridicule, the skepticism, the hours spent alone refining technique, building endurance, and sharpening instinct. Each moment had prepared her for this point, where influence extended beyond her own survival to shaping the next generation of warriors. Her impact was subtle but profound. Donovan, once her harshest critic, now sought her counsel in mission planning, valuing her perspective, not because of rank alone, but because of proven judgment under pressure. Harris and Reed, who had been slow to accept her, had become reliable allies, their respect forged in the fires of shared combat experience. The team had evolved, and in doing so, the culture of the unit itself had shifted, a quiet acknowledgement that skill and courage were what mattered most, not gender or preconceived expectations. Avery approached the armory, the room that had once been a place of mockery, now a symbolic site of triumph. She moved through the space with reverence, inspecting the racks of weapons, checking the maintenance logs, and observing the younger SEALs as they prepared for drills. She offered guidance where needed, small adjustments in technique, reminders of precision, patience, and calm under pressure. Her presence alone commanded attention, not through intimidation, but through quiet authority, grounded in experience. Outside, the team prepared for another mission briefing. Avery took her place among them, no longer a newcomer or an anomaly, but an integral part of the unit. The mission was routine in some ways, but carried the constant risk inherent to SEAL operations. Intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, and preparation for high-stakes interventions. She reviewed maps, assessed intelligence, and contributed to tactical decisions with the clarity of someone who had earned trust the hard way. The debriefs were not just about logistics or enemy positions. They were about strategy, anticipation, and the human element. Avery understood that leadership extended beyond issuing orders. It meant inspiring confidence, modeling discipline, and ensuring that each operator felt both challenged and supported. Her influence was growing quietly, but undeniably, shaping the operational ethos of the team. Later, she found a moment alone at the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, the ocean a constant companion and metaphor for the relentless challenges she faced. The waves pounded against the rocks, each one unique yet part of a larger rhythm. Avery reflected on how far she had come, from mockery in the armory, to the crucible of Operation Nightfall, to recognition and influence within the SEALs. The journey had been arduous, testing every aspect of her skill, courage, and resolve, but it had forged not only a warrior, but a leader. Her thoughts turned to the legacy she hoped to leave. Avery had always been aware that change in the SEAL community was slow, that acceptance was earned incrementally. Yet she saw the subtle shifts already occurring, candidates approaching her with questions, operators seeking her guidance, and an emerging culture that valued merit and competence over outdated assumptions. Her presence was proof that excellence could transcend bias, that courage and skill demanded recognition regardless of gender. The impact of her actions extended beyond her immediate team. Word of Avery Cole's performance during Operation Nightfall and her leadership in subsequent missions spread throughout the Naval Special Warfare community. Instructors, candidates, and veteran operators alike spoke of her precision, courage, and calm under fire. She became a symbol, not of novelty, but of unwavering excellence, a benchmark for what it meant to lead and perform as a SEAL. Back at the base, the team gathered for evening drills. Avery watched from the sidelines as new recruits navigated obstacle courses, cleared simulated buildings, and executed tactical maneuvers. She provided guidance when necessary, but mostly observed, offering subtle corrections and encouragement. Her influence was evident in the way the operators moved, confident, disciplined, and precise. She had become both a mentor and a standard-bearer, shaping the future through her actions and example. Later, she returned to the armory one final time that evening, checking weapons, maintaining gear, and ensuring readiness for any mission. Her thoughts drifted to the team she had led, the operators she had saved, and the colleagues who had once doubted her. Each memory reinforced the truth she had known all along. Excellence and courage speak louder than words, and trust is earned in the crucible of action. As night settled over Coronado, Avery reflected on the journey that had begun with mockery and skepticism. She had faced drills designed to break her, enemies intent on taking lives, and a culture that had questioned her place. Yet she had emerged not only intact but stronger, shaping her team, earning respect, and leaving a legacy that would endure far beyond a single mission or moment. She understood that the life of ASEAL was one of constant challenge, unending risk, and relentless commitment. There would be more missions, more obstacles, and more moments where judgment, skill, and courage would be tested. But Avery Cole faced the future with confidence, knowing she had proven herself in the armory, on the battlefield, and in the eyes of her peers. The waves crashed below, a reminder of the world's vastness and unpredictability. Yet Avery felt grounded, centered, and ready. She had earned her place, her respect, and her influence. She had transformed doubt into recognition, mockery into mentorship, and challenges into legacy. In the quiet solitude of that night, Lieutenant Avery Cole understood something fundamental. A true SEAL leaves a mark not through words, not through titles, but through action, courage, and leadership. Her journey had been extraordinary, but it was also the beginning of a lasting impact on her team, the SEAL community, and the generations of warriors who would follow in her footsteps. And as the stars reflected on the restless ocean, Avery smiled faintly, knowing she had done more than survive or succeed. She had set a standard. She had forged a legacy. And the SEALs who came after her would remember her name, not as a novelty or an anomaly, but as a symbol of courage, skill, and unwavering resolve. The mockery in the armory was long gone. What remained was respect, trust, and a story that would endure. The story of a woman who had faced every doubt, every challenge, and every enemy, and emerged as a true SEAL, forever leaving her mark on the unit and the legacy of naval special warfare.